is Goals with Soul, the podcast for visionary coaches and entrepreneurs, building your business with inspired action. In alignment with your mission and authentic message, so you can create impact for your soul clients and feel lit up every day. I'm your host, Jo Ingram, married mum of 3 daughters from London and a former ad agency director turned business coach and strategist. In Goals with Soul, we blend revenue generation with energetics, marketing strategies with pranic healing, and ambitious business goals with our soul's desires. If you're looking to build your business with less efforting and more ease, this is the podcast for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to Goals with Soul. If you're new to the show, I'm Jo Ingram, brand messaging strategist and business coach, helping ambitious coaches to create impact and scale their income with brand messaging clarity and client attraction strategies. And that's why I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Nick James. Nick is the founder of Expert Empires and has scaled multiple companies to 7 figures and beyond. In fact, I met Nick at the most recent Expert Empires events here in London, and he inspired me with a story about how somebody had reached out to him, somebody that couldn't afford to attend the event, and offered their services in event management for free, in return for just getting in the room and listening to some of the outstanding speakers that were there. Nick shared that just that morning, one of his mastermind students had handed back their ticket because they were unable to go. And he instantly gifted this person the ticket because they had reached out, they had offered value in return. They had taken a chance and asked for what they wanted. And that story was still ringing in my mind at 5 a.m. the next morning when I woke up with a slight hangover from the great socialising event we'd had the night before. And the first thought on my mind was, I'm going to reach out and invite Nick onto Goals with Soul. I knew that the value he would share would be amazing, but I did not know that within an hour he would have said yes. I believe he was in the gym, whereas I was still feeling a little sore-headed. But I took this as confirmation that, sometimes you do just have to take a chance. You have to put your neck out, you have to ask for what you want, you have to be willing to add value and create opportunities. And those are some of the lessons that Nick is going to share with us today. Coming up, he's going to talk about the strategies it takes to succeed and the 4 key disciplines you have to focus on in equal measure. His formula for 6- and 7-figure business success is born of his past failures, from dropping out of university to spectacularly failing at his first coaching business. Nick was 24 when he finally found the winning formula, and Expert Empires is now the UK's #1 business event for expert speakers. He's had people like Gary V, Grant Cardone, Lewis Howes, who I saw when I was there, as well as some homegrown UK talent like Carrie Green and Lisa Johnson. As if this wasn't enough, one of the most unique things about Nick was the fact that he was working alongside Tony Robbins' team from the age of 12. Nick's experienced both the ups and downs it takes to create a successful business, and I love how he shares it all with complete transparency. Let's dive in. Welcome to Goals with Soul. I'm Jo Ingram, and today my guest is Expert Empires, Nick James. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thanks, Jo. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. And as I just shared with the listeners about how I came across you and was so inspired by the work that you do with Expert Empires, something that I would just love to start off with, because my mouth dropped open when you started talking about it, was your experience with the Tony Robbins organization from a really young age. And my first thought of this was, what could I be right now if I'd have got into that then? And so what is life like to kind of grow up with that kind of mindset work?
Yeah, I mean, I always share that I do count myself extremely fortunate, extremely lucky to have had the opportunity to be around kind of personal development, self-improvement from such a young age. As I probably shared, Jo, with you before, my mum was actually, she was going on her own personal development journey, in my kind of early teens, and invited me to go along to these Tony Robbins seminars. And so I literally spent from the age of 12 to like 19. So for like 7 years, we traveled all over the world, America, Australia, the Far East, all over Europe, initially attending these seminars and going on our own kind of personal development journey. And then later on, my mum became a trainer for Tony's organization. And I used to get flown all over the world to kind of work at the events, which ranged from, like manning registration desks to taking care of like the AV setup and everything. So I kind of learned everything there was to learn about running events when I was a kid from the people I still believe to this day to be the best in the world at it.
Oh my goodness, outstanding. I joined Tony Robbins at the UPW event in London in 2019. And that was my first real interaction with that organization. And to have 10,000 people in a room and it running the way it did and to walk us over fire, for goodness sake, was just blows your mind. And really, I can see how it's given you not only your mindset stuff, but also this great inroads into running these phenomenal events, of which I took part in your most recent one. So I can see firsthand how that professionalism, but not just that, but with ease and excitement for everyone really, really rubs off. So I was just curious to dive into that a bit more. Like, what did you take from that experience that has really set you up as both man and business owner in your current, multiple 7-figure manifestation?
Yeah, I think the bit that no one really pays attention to, or that most people miss, the most valuable thing that I got from, probably, like I said, 8 years in that environment and then continued working in the kind of industry. I worked for an NLP training company in sales and then became a speaker for them in my early 20s. All of the success that I've built probably from my early 20s to now, which is like, 16 years, has really come about because of the connections that I created, the relationships I built, the people that I got to know. Like I've still got clients today that I met when I was a teenager, and they weren't clients then, obviously, but I got to know them. And then when I built my business later on, there were people that I'd already built a lot of goodwill and connection with. And so they found it quite easy to decide to become a client, a customer of ours. So I think the bit that people underestimate is the relationships, the connections, that there isn't many people in this world, this industry, that I can't get to quite easily. But that's not because I've been so good at building connections over the last year or two. It's because I've been doing it for the last decade or two. So that bit I think is underestimated. Yes, of course, the personal development journey, the work on my mindset, and my development, of course, was huge. And of course, being up close and personal with the Tony Robbins business and seeing how they operated from the inside has been incredibly insightful. But the bit that I think gets overlooked often is the people that I surrounded myself with for many years and the connections I made, and I've been able to leverage ever since.
Oh my goodness. I mean, clearly you're really masterful at that relationship building piece, but I think you might be just a little bit modest here as well, because you are the common denominator in all of this. And it's the relationships with you that are really elevating your success and your brand. And what I'm so curious about, because I specialize in brand messaging particularly, and what I teach is that it's really about bringing the whole you of you and diving into all of the different things that you have to leverage that really light you up. So I was curious, Nick, what is it about you, at least that you would say, makes you stand out and unique? And I know that you've got like so much going on as a father and, as someone that's interested in so many different things. How do you bring that to make a brand that people are so resonant with and so compelled to get involved with?
Yeah, this could be a long, windy answer, so I'll do that. Look, you're asking me a question about myself. I could talk about myself all day, right? Look, there's an old adage, which is the most important relationship you're ever going to have is a relationship you have with yourself. And I think from 12 years of age to like 19, those 7 years are in most cases the years where you have the most challenging relationship with yourself, where you're trying to get to know who you really are and decide what you stand for and what your values are and all that kind of stuff. And by the way, mine were no different. Like I was not particularly confident. I didn't really stand out as a kid, as a teenager. So like, if you went and interviewed all my friends from school, they'd be like, yeah, I tell you what I was like. If you've ever seen the TV show The In-Betweeners, that was me.
I do know it.
I wasn't the coolest or the best sports person. I also wasn't like a complete loser that no one wanted to be around. I was like an in-betweener, right? And so I think that, and that's, you know, it was pretty normal. The difference was I had all this education and experience and was surrounding myself with these amazing people outside of the traditional education piece. And you know what? I'm not even sure the impact was that obvious in those years. I think where the impact became obvious have been in the later years where, you know, when I think about how I do business now, and look, I don't for a second think that I'm better than anybody else in particular or anything like that. But what I will say is I feel like I'm quite comfortable in doing things my way. So, you know, Joe, you've been to my events. I think what you see on stage is exactly what you're going to get off stage. I'm certainly not going to stand on stage and pretend I've got all the answers and that I know it all, because I don't and I haven't. And equally, I'll happily share, you know, what I've done that's worked, the mistakes I've made, the whole 9 yards. And I think in our world, I think people are trying to portray themselves as perfect, which actually, because we all know that doesn't exist, it kind of puts people off a little bit. I suppose it's probably it's a symptom, or it's an example of the world we live in now today, the culture we're in, where, you know, everything's Instagram filtered to be perfect, and it's just not. It's not real. And so I think the average person struggles to relate to that perfection, and it feels unattainable. And so I think, you know, and I like to combine every different part of my life in my business. So, you know, my kids come to our events. They love getting a couple of days off school more than anything, because they're normally in the week. You know, I share a lot on socials, on Instagram, that, you know, on a Saturday morning, it is not glitz and glam. I'm wearing my trackies, and most of the time it's pissing it down and muddy, and I'm linesman for my son's football team. Like, that's the reality of it. And so I think a lot of times we're trying to portray something that isn't real. And so, like, I think being at peace with who you are and what you're good at. And by the way, a lot of people on the opposite side of the spectrum, they're not comfortable with saying what they're good at either. So it's like they're either trying to be Instagram perfect and saying they're the master of everything. That's not true. Or they're scared to say, oh, I'm really good at this. And I think actually the balance is somewhere in the middle, where you go, hey, you know what? I'm comfortable in myself to say, I'm really good at this and I think I can really help you. But at the same time, don't make any mistakes or think I'm perfect, because I'm not, and here are all my faults and failures and lessons I've learned. And I think the ability to do both of those things from a place of, one of our core values in our business is we practice self-awareness and humility. And I think those two things together are key. To have the self-awareness to go, hey, I'm really good at this, and not feel embarrassed to say that, but also the humility to not portray yourself as perfect. I think that's what makes somebody approachable, relatable, and therefore you're more likely to do business with them.
Oh, I mean, all of that is so true. Being grounded is just something that, if you're not going to be in a space where you can feel really just comfortable with who you are and what your gifts are and where your brilliance lies, then you're never going to sell. But likewise, if you can't resonate and attract people by being vulnerable and authentic, you're going to have the opposite problem. I love the way that you've put that. And I love as well that you share very much in your bio and on your website about your early failures. I know that you dropped out of university, and I know that your first coaching business failed. And my understanding is that those experiences really helped you then work out what you were doing wrong, what you need to do differently, where you went on to build several businesses that have done tremendously well. Are you happy to share like those key lessons in that early stage that probably took you to that first big business breakthrough?
Yeah, and by the way, even after the first business breakthrough, there was still a load of screw-ups afterwards, and it's important to share that too. So yeah, I think you know, I've often talk about my first coaching business, which I think a lot of people who have a desire to start a business probably have a similar experience to this. Like, I had the idea, but I had no clue about how to run a business. So I just did the best I could at the time, which was rubbish. So I went, well, like, I'd been around the Tony Robbins NLP world all through my teenage years. So I went, and the bit that I often don't share was I was actually flown over to San Diego for a week to coach at a Tony Robbins kids camp. So there was like teenagers from all over the world. There was probably 300-400 teenagers that came to this event for a week, and I was one of the coaches there. And I'm probably like 19, 20 at this point. And I came back and I was like, that was incredible. Absolutely, like, loved every minute of it. And that maybe that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So I decided to become a youth coach and teach this, NLP and personal development in schools, and had this big vision for it. But I had no clue about marketing. I had no clue about sales. The idea, by the way, I still believe is a good concept. And I know people that have made businesses like this work since. So the idea wasn't flawed. I was perfectly capable of speaking, coaching. I was good at those things, but I was rubbish at business. So, as I often share, I had one client that was a referral from my mum. She was coaching the parents, and then the daughter was struggling. So they brought me in to coach her, but that was it. I didn't know how to get clients. I didn't know how to market myself or sell at all. So I ended up going and taking a job working for an NLP training company in their sales department. And that was like the best experience I ever had. As you mentioned, I dropped out of university. I was doing business studies, ironically, and then failed after that with my first business because I didn't learn anything usable at university, practical. I learned more in 3 months working in sales for this small training company than I had in 3 years at uni, because I learned how to operate and run a small business. And then when I left that company a couple of years later, then I knew how to go about taking those first steps. Like, how do you get your first few clients? How do you position yourself in the market? How do you utilize your existing contacts and audience? And I did all of that. And that's how I ended up getting the first business off the ground.
Yeah, it's so inspiring. There are thousands of coaches in the market, right? Since the pandemic, more than ever, people have flooded in because it's such a great opportunity and you can help people and you can make great income, but not being able to run a business and not being able to set yourself up appropriately and focus on the right things seems to be a common flaw, and people are giving up really quickly. People that would have amazing businesses and make great transformations for their clients are getting it wrong. They're not making money, and therefore they're retracting from their dreams and the people that they could help.
But think about it though, it's only the same as someone being a brilliant hairdresser or a brilliant chef and just not having a clue how to run a business. There's loads of them out there as well. Just being a great coach or a great speaker doesn't entitle you to have a great business, because the discipline of running a business is very different to the discipline of providing the service. So like I said, your hairdresser, who might be brilliant at cutting hair or styling hair, has never been taught how to do marketing, how to sell, how to manage the financials, how to plan for growth, how to hire and train and manage a team. They don't know any of that stuff. If they've worked in a company before, they might have seen somebody do all those things really badly, which is even worse, because then they've got no model of what good looks like. So I think that the distinction between the skill and the business stuff's the same. It's the same. It doesn't matter if you're a hairdresser, a chef, a life coach. It doesn't matter. The business principles are still the same. But I think we put so much emphasis on the skill and not enough on the business.
And so what do you see? Because I know that you work with thousands of people coming through this space. What do you see typically shows up where you're like, okay, you got to unlearn this and you got to instead really focus over here? What are the classics?
Yeah, I think a few things. One, generally speaking, a lack of structure. So people are sitting down, on a Monday morning with a blank sheet of paper and going, right, what am I going to do today? And they're just writing a to-do list based on like ideas that just pop up on that day. And there's no strategy behind that. It's all just off the cuff, winging it. And I can speak about this with authority because it's what I did for the first 6 years I was in business. I just made it up as I went along. And it got me so far. It got me to a point where, fortunately, because of the experience I'd had working in sales and because of my many years in the kind of Tony Robbins environment, I had enough to get me to a certain point. I was able to sell and I was able to provide a decent quality service, enough to get me to a certain point. But it was complete chaos. And I got stuck because what I was able to do on my own, well, I wasn't able to then replicate and teach others to do. I hired a couple of people in my team, but we got to a point of maximum capacity. I didn't know how to grow beyond that. So the first thing is a lack of structure in how you operate. And I suppose what sits alongside that is most people that start a business have got a natural tendency to gravitate to one of a few core disciplines. So like I naturally gravitated towards sales and marketing because that's what my experience was. And I was good enough at that to get to a certain point. But I was rubbish at organizing stuff. I was rubbish at putting systems and processes in place. My attention to detail has always been not particularly great. So I dropped the ball on lots of important things. So it's good at generating income and getting clients, but they're not so good at the detail of ensuring that all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. And so that was a big gap. I was also awful at managing money because I'd never been taught how. And historically, my family have been quite good at earning it, but not very good at keeping it. So I carried on the family tradition, of course. So I think we naturally gravitate to what we're good at. So there might be another person who's not so hot on the sales and marketing side, but they're brilliant at organization. And the whole thing, like it looks and feels like perfect, but there's no money coming in. There's no clients, there's no customers. Yeah. So I think you'll have a natural tendency to gravitate towards one of what I call the 4 key disciplines, really, in any small business. When I say small, I mean like you're in the early stages. In no particular order, well, probably in this order would be most appropriate. Marketing first. You got to get your message out there. You know all about this, Joe. Then sales, taking that marketing and the interest you've generated and turning it into clients and customers and cash. Then delivering on the product or the service you've sold and making sure you've got happy clients. And then fourth, manage the finances, look after the money. Now, as you grow and scale, there are others, of course. You then got recruiting team members and managing and leading and all these different things. But ultimately, in the early stages, it's those 4 things. And most people will naturally gravitate towards one of those 4. And the one you gravitate towards will probably be the one that you'll succeed most in, but you'll fall short in the others. Certainly what I did. So I think it's really about being good at all 4 of those disciplines and making sure you put an appropriate amount of time and energy and focus into each. Which, like I said, I didn't do particularly well the first probably 6 years. I was very heavy on sales and marketing, but not so good on the others. And then it was only in 2014 when I kind of learned how to create a structure in the business, which then allowed me to recruit people to take over marketing, take over sales, take over client experience and running the events and all of those things that we now have. We did not have before that. It was really just me.
Oh, that's so relatable. I know I came out of 18 plus years working for advertising agencies in London and moving into launching my coaching business. I thought, well, this is going to be super, super easy because I'm so structured. But the problem was I got busy doing all the things and burned out in the first 6 months because I was just trying to take on all of those 4 roles simultaneously within 24 hours. And conversely, then went in the other direction. So I was like, I see it as being all in my masculine. And then I went, okay, well, I need to go with the flow and my intuition, and spent 6 months walking barefoot through the forest, which I would recommend to anyone to do that, but not for 6 months solid if you intend to build a business. So I had to kind of find a way of actually balancing all of that. And the way I see it now is to go with that intuition, but actually building the masculine structures, the soldiers for your business that really needs to be in place so you can actually move it forward without killing yourself in the process. So I love what you said around those 4 structured areas and making sure that you're really succeeding in all of them and not kind of going with the flow so much. You're just leaning into the bits that you feel most aligned with and happy to follow, and then let the others go.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you spoke a little bit about the masculine and the feminine. And I think either extreme is not going to be that helpful in your business. So if you're, and by the way, this isn't a man-woman thing, this is a masculine, feminine energy thing. But if you naturally tend to be more comfortable in your masculine energy, as I am, I'm really good at structure, getting stuff done, implementation. But where I fell short historically was some of the more feminine energy disciplines in the business. And if you go too far on the extreme of feminine energy and don't have any masculine energy or any structure in there, then it's not going to work either. The hardest bit when you're starting is if it's just you've got to try and, in the same way that I had to cover marketing and sales, delivery, the finances, and I was good at some of those, but not all. Same goes for this. Like if you're naturally more in feminine energy, you're probably going to be brilliant when it comes to really looking after the clients or the customers and making people feel cared for. And where you might fall short is more of the structured elements that are required. It might be that, drilling out 50 or 100 phone calls in a day to make sales, that often requires more masculine energy to take on that kind of tasking. That might become more difficult for you, or not feel like you're in your natural flow. So I think the hardest bit when you're starting out, when it's just you, is that you've got to find a balance between both of those energies. It's where great business partnerships are an advantage. So if you've got business partners that complement one another, then that really makes it a lot easier, because you've kind of got both sides of it covered.
Yeah. And you call to the point about sales, and I can see that I've got some resistance going on. So that's telling me I need to ask this question, which is, you talk about like making loads of calls and getting yourself out there. And clearly we need to get sales, and we need to get out of our one bubble, because people are going to resonate with our message. But if we want our business to grow, we have to get it out there, and we have to have those conversations. What do you recommend, with your background in sales and clearly having built such a phenomenal business as it stands right now? What makes the difference, and how can a solopreneur put themselves out there, and how can they get that done without that kind of ickiness feeling? What would you say?
Well, I think first of all, how can someone put themselves out there? The first answer is in whatever way is appropriate for them. So I don't buy into you have to do video, or you have to do speaking or live events, or you have to do a podcast, or you have to write a book or blogs or whatever. You do what you're great at. But as I said right at the start, one of the keys, I think, to success is self-awareness. So if you are rubbish on video and you know you're rubbish on video, don't try and build your profile based on a YouTube channel. Doesn't make any sense. But you might be an incredibly gifted writer. You might be brilliant at that. Well, in that case, maybe writing a book would be the best way for you to raise your profile and get your message out there. Equally, you might hate writing, be awful at it, but you've just got a natural knack of using your voice. Well, great, like build your profile based on podcasting, and I'm using a few of the core platforms, I suppose, here as an example, but you get what I'm saying. Like, be self-aware enough to know what you're great at, and then build the strategy for how you're going to get your message out there based on those skills. That'd be my first thing. Look, the bottom line is we have to sell if we want to build a successful business. Now, what that looks like, feels like to you will vary, it will be different. But ultimately, we have to find a way to communicate with a potential client or customer and ask for money. Otherwise, you're never going to build a successful business. Now, how you ask for the money, whether that's based on doing, one of the strategies that we've been using recently is like a 5-day challenge where people come into a Facebook group and we look after them for 5 days and teach them loads of great stuff. But at some point, I'm going to say, hey, if you've loved this so far and you want to continue working with us, here's how you do it. Here's a great offer. Go and buy it. Like, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not in sales mode in that part of the process. So I think you've got to be okay and comfortable with the sales conversation. Again, you know, some people are naturally really good at that. If you know that is not your natural strength, then it might be that that's one of the first hires you make, to bring somebody in that's really good at that. Or it might be a business partnership that you take on, somebody who's naturally great at that. So like, for example, I have a few different businesses, but one of them is a partnership with a guy called Matt Elwell. It's called the Elite Closing Academy. It's a sales training business. Now, Matt is brilliant at sales and he's brilliant at teaching sales. But he's actually not very good at, nor does he really want to deal with the structure in the business, the leading the team. It just so happens that's the bit that I love. And actually, having run a business for many, many years, and I've got to be careful what I say here. Like, I'm very grateful for being able to do what I do. But there comes a point where standing in front of an audience every single day gets a little bit boring. Now, I know that you might be listening to this and going, if I could stand in front of an audience every single day and speak for the rest of my life, like, I'm made. And that's how I used to feel as well. But when you've been doing it for 12, 13 years, and by the way, like, over the last few years in particular, like 150 days a year, standing at the front of a room talking, like, I'm going, this is hard work and tiring. And if I want to now grow my business, I haven't got any more days that I can do that. If anything, I'd like to do a bit less of it. I don't want to do none of it. I still love running Expert Empires events and run the masterminds that we run. But bringing Matt and becoming partners with Matt in this business meant that he could do the bit that he was really good at and wanted to do. And I could step back from doing the things that I'd done a lot of and wanted to do less of. So I think sometimes a partnership can work well. The biggest mistake I see people make with partnerships is, like, they partner with their identical twin. So it's like you're just finding somebody who can do all the things you can do, but they've also got all the faults you've got as well. That makes no sense to me. You're almost looking for your polar opposite when you're doing a partnership, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really good insight. And I think for a lot of people in the earlier stages of business, just outsourcing something that they really don't want to do, whether that's people jumping in the DMs for you or somebody helping you with the content, and just create that ease in your business. You do the things that are your zone of genius and let somebody else get on with the bits that you don't like doing. Otherwise, you're going to just literally spin your wheels for another year trying to master things that you just can't do. And meanwhile, your business is probably starting to get away from you over time, and you're not going to feel lit up. And that's what the key is. I mean, certainly for me, the whole reason I'm doing this is because I love doing it, helping people with their brand messaging and being able to bring in the skills that I learned in advertising, blending it with energetics, which is an area that I'm absolutely passionate about, is what's made me happy for the first time ever in the job that I'm doing, because I get to help people doing what I love doing all day long, and I do for free, but I get to earn money with it. And so, finding these levers, and the ones that you're describing are in the business, is absolutely gold, really, because so many of us at those early stages of entrepreneurship are going to find that if we fail at one of those, we're going to just decide that the whole business in itself hasn't worked. So I'm sort of curious, from the people that you work with, and I know that you work with a huge group of people that do a lot of different things, different expertise. What would you say was the common denominator between those people that really break through? And I know your masterminds are in tiers. So those people that hit that six-figure business really fast or get to scale and so on. What are the difference between the ones that you see coming through your masterminds that are like smashing it, and those that you could probably predict are not going to get where they thought they wanted to go?
Yeah, interesting. Well, first of all, I learned a long time ago not to try and guess who's going to smash it and who isn't, because invariably I'll be wrong. Because by the way, look, sometimes you just know, you just get a feeling, you go, this person's got it, whatever it is, that X factor. And sometimes you go, look, this person just, like, the concept they've got is not, like, it probably doesn't it's probably not a viable business proposition. So there's those extremes, of course, but in most cases, I think those who succeed fastest, first of all, I do think, and this is not a popular thing to say, I do think that the people that have got the natural charisma are more likely to succeed. That is just truth. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat it or say that everyone's got an equal chance, because that's not true. Like some people have got a natural charisma, they've got a natural ability to communicate, which I guess is what charisma is, and they have a much better chance of success. That's just the way it is. And this is why I'm so bloody lucky, because from 12 years of age, I was learning essentially how to be a great communicator. So then when I got to the point when I was starting my first proper business, I'm like, I got the ability to pick up the phone and have a conversation, or literally point a camera at me and I can talk into the lens, or stick me on a stage and I can give a presentation. I had that innate ability, which I think takes many years of learning and practice to master. But I did all that like when I didn't need to do it to make a living, you know. Like I was giving presentations to like the staff at Tony Robbins seminars as one of the senior members of staff. I was giving presentations when I was like 18 years of age. So then when I had to do it for real 5 years later to get paid, it wasn't new to me. I'd already built that. So I do think, look, some people have got the natural charisma, but that's kind of where I'm saying everyone's got strengths and weaknesses. So have the self-awareness to know what yours are. Like if you're great at speaking, build your business based on speaking. If you know you're rubbish at it, but you're really good at the written word. I know people who never shoot a video, never speak on stage, very rarely even have a conversation with another human being, but they've got successful businesses based upon writing content in, and like there's one guy in particular I'm thinking of. I don't know how big his business is, but I'm going to venture and say it's multi-six, maybe 7 figures, has got a membership site with a Facebook group. He posts in there daily. The posts are great. I'm a member, just love reading his stuff. But he never does a video, or very rarely, and like never does much else other than written posts, but he's brilliant at that. So, you know, I think you got to know what you're great at and then build your business on that, rather than trying to be somebody you're not. The second thing, like I said, the natural charisma or playing to your strengths. The other thing really is, you know, there is no getting away from the fact that, you know, the more you're willing to, the work ethic bit, really, it's the more you're willing to implement and take action and then not give up when it doesn't work first time. Because that's, I think, what no one sees. You know, you said to me, you know, I'm fairly open about my ups and downs and successes and failures, but like, you know, I got to a point where I built a multi-7-figure business in 2015 and lost it all. So just because you reach a certain point does not guarantee you're going to stay there forever. You know, mid 2015, I started from zero and had to begin from nothing again. So, you know, I think, yeah, I think having the persistence to not give up as well when it's not working, because that's the bit that no one talks about, is that, you know, the old adage, it's, you know, it takes a long time to become an overnight success.
That's it. It's like tenacity. And I think I read a stat the other day that said something about those people that are most successful at really breaking through at 6 figures, 7 figures and beyond are those people that keep at it. And although, you know, I think in this industry, we're too exposed to the overnight successes.
Which, by the way, aren't true. They're not true.
Yeah.
Looks like they are. But remember, it takes a long time to become an overnight success. So all you, like, someone that is sharing the story of becoming an overnight success is only telling you this bit. But what really I would want to know, if I'm interviewing somebody, I'm going, right, so yes, got this. Tell me about the 10 years that were preceded it, please. Because I want to know what happened there, because that's important, because you would never have done this otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, you know, that's probably a story that's not shared enough in our industry. By the way, there's one factor that trumps everything I've said that is the difference between people who like achieve success more quickly and sustain it. And it's also probably the thing that enabled me to, pick myself up off the ground when everything went to shit, quite frankly. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
You certainly are.
But you're editing anyway. You can always edit that out if you need to, or beep me out. It's fine.
No, it's staying.
Number one thing, absolute 100% responsibility for what you think, what you feel, the actions you take, and the results you get. The second you start blaming somebody else for any of that stuff, you're dead.
Oh my God, that's so true. It's so true. And it's like one of the questions that came up, both a question I asked a client of mine, and then in beautiful synergy, I was asked by my own coach on a slightly different topic. But the question was, when I said such and such isn't working, or my client said the same to me, the question was, what have you done? What solutions have you tried? And of course, that question in itself says, I sort of tried, but then and it just becomes so apparent that you haven't actually tried. You haven't taken total responsibility at all.
Well, and so, what solutions have you tried, or what have you done, is a great question. My mum, who's an amazing coach, and obviously I'm biased, but I do believe she's an amazing coach, has a great question, and this might need beeping out. She's right potty mouth, my mother. She's well in the 60s, by the way, but swears like a trooper. And when somebody's got a problem or something that's not working, she'll go, so tell me, how is all of this your fucking fault? In other words, how have you created this? Because it's all well and good saying, well, Facebook changed the algorithm, or this customer is being a pain in the ass, or this member of staff's left, or this member of staff's not pulling their weight, or whatever it is. But the question still remains, how the nice version, not the Nikki V version, the nice version is, how have you created that? Because if the member of staff isn't performing, guess what? I created that because I hired the member of staff. I'm at the point now where even then, I don't hire members of staff anymore. I have people in the business that do that. So then I have to, I go, that member of staff is underperforming, pissing me off, wasting my money. I go, I didn't hire them, but I hired the person who hired them. And I lead and manage that person who hired them. And I created the culture and the environment that allowed their poor performance to exist. So how did I create it? Is this all my effing fault, as my mum would say? And I think that attitude, that question, it's not easy. It's really simple, but it's not easy, because no one likes to admit that they are responsible, accountable, they're the person at fault, at blame. It's a much easier life to go, it's not my fault, somebody else's fault.
Yeah. But then you get to reframe it, because the next question is, so how are you going to change that? What are you going to do about it? And now it's back in your control.
Ultimately, it gives you the power. You go, if you have the power to create that reality, that problem, that result you weren't after, you've also got the power and the ability to create something different instead. So it just, look, I'm not saying that stuff outside of your control can't impact your life and your business. What I am saying is that when you act as if it's all your fault, it gives you the power and the ability to change it much more easily.
And to shift out that victim mindset, because it's not going to help you. It's not going to help your business. And I know, I've been in that. We've all been in that at some point. And the ability to ask the right questions and lift yourself out of it and make changes is what's going to give us that tenacity and that sustainability for our businesses. And, I'm loving the fact that you're here after all these years with the ups and the downs, coming through the other side to share the story with us today about, what's got you from there to here.
And by the way, Joe, to answer the question from right at the start, like being around Tony Robbins from 12 years of age, all through my teens, that one piece that I just shared there, that's it. I go, even we're 27 years later, still, I did a post on Facebook a few days ago. I don't know if you saw it. I just went, 27 years studying personal development summarized. Take responsibility for everything you think, feel, and do. That's it. If you can do that, that's, by the way, that is hard. It's simple, but it's not easy. It's hard to do, but if you can do that truly and crack it, everything else falls into place. And that's the bit that I think that's the biggest advantage. I take it for granted. I just assume that, like, well, clearly everyone does that. And I don't now, because I've been doing it so long and studying it so long, I've been around those kind of people for so long, it's just second nature. And that's the bit that's the biggest advantage I've had, really, I think.
Yeah, I love that, because you can learn the best strategies in the world, but if you're not going to take 100% responsibility, you're going to find they're not working for you, and then you're going to bitch about them. So,
and by the way, would love to pretend that I get this right 100% of the time, but my wife's going to listen to this maybe, and she'll say, well, what about the other day when something broke at home and you were throwing things at it and cursing the person that installed that system in the house? Yeah, that happens as well sometimes. So yeah, I'm not saying I get it perfect every time, but you know, default into that position more often than not. I think that gives you ultimate power and control.
Oh my God, so true. And I would love it, Nick. Would you be happy to share some inspired action for us this week? Something that we could take away and do simply in the space of less than a day that's going to make a difference for our business?
Yeah, there's so many things that I could suggest. So I'm probably going to suggest the first thing that I encourage people to do. Like, there's so many. Right, okay. I'm in my head. I'm going, which one? I'm going to give you one that might be a bit different that you might not have heard before. Ask yourself a couple of questions. The first question is, who do I know that should be working with me, that should be a client or should be a customer right now, but isn't? Make a list of those people. Who do I know that should be a client or should be a customer right now, but they're not? Make a list. I guarantee anybody listening to this who's, assuming you've already got a business, I bet you could list 5, 10, maybe even more names. And all I would suggest, like you said, something you can do in a day, list the people out and phone them. Like, don't overthink it. Don't go, well, what am I going to say? Like, don't try and script it or anything. Just make a list of people that you know should be working with you. They'd be a great fit for your products, your services, but they're not a customer or client yet. Make a list, phone them, and just connect and have a conversation and see where it goes. Like, I could give you here's how you structure the conversation, but for now, just phone them and reach out and see how it goes. You'd be amazed. Because most of the time they're already aware of you and they were waiting for the phone call. You just didn't bloody make it.
Yeah. And before anybody listening says, yeah, but I don't phone my clients, this is absolutely applicable for getting onto Instagram and leaving a voice note and starting a conversation, right?
Just reach out. I mean, I would prefer you to phone them, because then it's a two-way immediate conversation. But if you haven't got the phone number or whatever, like, it's never been easier. Like you said, you could do a voice note on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. There's plenty of ways to do it. Just reach out to them and have a conversation. You'd be amazed. I bet if there's 10 names and you reach out to all 10, I guarantee one of them at least will go, hey, you know what? I'm so glad you reached out, because I've been meaning to speak to you about so-and-so. And then you've got an opportunity there straight away.
Now, because I get the opportunity to pick your brain just a little bit further, I know the sort of resistance that comes up for a lot of my clients and a lot of people I work with, which is, oh, that's a great idea, and I am going to do it, and then they don't. Now, this is a mindset problem. It's not that they can't make a list, and it's not that they can't leave a voice note. It's just simply that they haven't done it. And what would you say to people that are kind of feeling like an imposter or less than, or scared of being judged, and all those things that typically crop up for coaches as they're building their business? What can they do to kind of get over that quickly?
Yeah. My guess is that the resistance comes from a place of, I don't want to be seen as selling or being pushy or anything like that. So maybe see it differently. And the reality is that by reaching out to this person, you're coming from a place of service. Like, the reason you're not taking the action, reaching out, having the conversation, is because you would be doing it for your own selfish reasons, and that doesn't feel good. So maybe it's just an intention thing. It's like when you make the list, if your intention is how much money can I extract from these people, you're probably, if that's not who you are, you're going to feel really awkward and uncomfortable about reaching out to them. If the intention is I've made this list and these are people that I know I can really help, my products, my services can really serve them, it can make a difference. And you reach out without any attachment to them becoming a client or paying you a certain amount of money. You just reach out from a place of service, takes all the pressure off them. And then when you have the conversation and they go, I'm so glad, Joe, you reached out, because actually I've been meaning to contact you. I've seen what you post. I've been listening to your podcast, or I've been, I've seen some of your posts on social, and I think you could really help me. But 1 out of 10 probably will. They'll go, oh, tell me a little bit more then about how you can help me. And then they're asking. Then you're completely within your rights to then tell them about your products, your services. But yeah, I think it's the intention that's the problem. I think when you're coming from, if your intention is to get, then it feels icky. If your intention is to just serve and give, and you're not doing it with, I guess you're not doing it with any, you're not doing it with the, like, I want something in return. There's no attachment. There's no, I guess, strings attached to that conversation. Then I think it feels very different for you, for the other person as well.
So perfect. So in summary, get your strategy right, but combine that with the right energy. And that's when you're really going to start resonating and cutting through. Thank you, Nick. You've been absolutely amazing. I appreciate it so much. If people would like to know a little bit more about what you do and learn about your business, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, cool. 2 places. Go to our main website, expertempires.com. There'll be information about all our upcoming events, masterminds, etc. If you want to contact me directly or follow me, Instagram's probably the best place. I am at Nick James Events.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
My thanks to Nick. And if you want to get in touch with him and his organisation, you can find those details in the show notes. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe to Goals with Soul. Like and follow us. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is at iamjoe.ingram. And if you're a coach looking to attract a steady flow of ideal coaching clients through your unique brand messaging, grab my free messaging checklist by sending me a DM at iamjoe.ingram on Instagram, and I'll share all the details with you. Have an inspired action week. Take care. Bye now.